Hello, everyone. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. And if you're a returning subscriber, thanks for the return trip. I just wanted to share my thoughts and experiences about what it means to be the parent of a special needs child. There are a lot of misconceptions floating around the community about what that means. There are misconceptions about what a special needs child looks like and the effect on the overall family unit. Let me give you a little insight into what I have been through as a special needs parent. I was in a car accident when I was 5 months pregnant with my oldest daughter. I went into preterm labor, which had to be reversed, and I was placed on modified bed rest for the remainder of my pregnancy. My daughter was ultimately born a month early and spent 10 days in the neonatal intensive care unit. Early on, my daughter wasn't what you would call a normal child. She was incredibly hyperactive. She didn't sleep. We would literally need to put her to bed around midnight in the hopes that she would sleep until 5 a.m. She became a master at locks, even sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night when we were sleeping. We had to put locks on the door at the very top just to ensure she wouldn't escape. My ex-husband and I went on to have two additional children, another daughter, and my youngest, a son. They were night and day compared to my oldest daughter. Her speech was delayed compared to them, and there was clearly a difference in the quality of her speech. When it came to educational challenges, my oldest struggled immensely, while the only struggles my two younger kids had was just staying focused. All three of them have been diagnosed with ADHD. My oldest is the combined type, my younger daughter was inattentive, and my son was hyperactive. While my two younger kids picked up concepts with relative ease, my oldest daughter struggled even with basic reading skills, no matter how hard we tried and how hard we worked with her. When she was in the fourth grade, she failed all core classes, yet due to a loophole in the state laws, she didn't qualify for special education assistance. Out of desperation, we reached out to our state's university education department, who did IQ testing and educational assessments under the supervision of the education dean. It was very expensive, but thanks to these results, we were finally able to get my daughter placed into the special education system. We had all three of our kids tested and found out the reason for the disparity between my oldest and my two youngest children. While the younger ones tested just under the genius level, my oldest was below average. She would be referred to as mild MR by older terminology. It was also decided that she exhibited some autistic traits. However, due to her already diagnosed severe mental illnesses, a full diagnosis was never made. We learned to have different expectations for our children. While the youngers were expected to strive for A's and B's, we were more than happy with C's for my older daughter. While we were trying to be realistic and be able to reward her for working just as hard, instead, she viewed that as us calling her stupid. There was no way we could win. Those are some of the educational challenges that a family with special needs children can face. Let's move on to the emotional and mental health challenges. The embarrassment you face when your child throws a fit when they don't get the candy bar they want at the grocery store and proceeds to throw themselves violently on the ground screaming as though you just killed them. Or them throwing food in the restaurant because they wanted crinkle cut fries instead of steak fries. We had the police called on us when we lived in an apartment because they could hear my daughter screaming at the top of her lungs. For us, holidays became a struggle. Every birthday and major holiday, such as Christmas or Thanksgiving, she had major meltdowns. We never understood why it became a trigger, but it was. She even threw a fit in the middle of my niece's confirmation because she wasn't the center of attention. As time went on, she began stealing from us, from her siblings, even from her school, teachers, and classmates. She stole money from us, candy from her siblings, jewelry from her cousin. She was she was a she was a kleptomaniac. My marriage went into shambles. Our younger children lived in fear and embarrassment. While our younger children were avid athletes and we were able to participate in athletics with them, we spent so many hours at a therapist's office or in individualized education plans at the school. Time became a tight commodity. Weekly therapy, family support workers for her. The amount of time you spend with medical professionals as the parent of a special needs child is insane. It is a huge drain upon the family unit, time that you would so much prefer doing things like enrolling them in an activity that they would like to participate in, time you would rather spend doing things as a family, taking family vacations or even day trips. You desperately need a break from the strain, but who do you turn to when no one, not even family, will care for your child? Who do you confide in when none of the other parents understand, and between appointments for one child and trying your best to maintain a sense of normalcy for your other children, you have no time left for something like a support group? You learn that a schedule is highly important for a special needs child because when that schedule is broken, you are at the risk of a meltdown or worse. One of the hardest parts of raising a child with significant challenges is just how alone you really do feel. Other parents look at you like you're a failure. Why can't you just make her behave? Why do you let her run around uncontrolled like a wild animal? While my two younger children were invited to sleepovers and birthday parties often, my oldest never was. Her peers were frankly scared of her. No one wanted to invite her. This caused her to only harbor more resentment towards her younger siblings. She didn't think that it was fair, and the disconnect she had between her own behavior and their reluctance to invite her never sunk in. When my daughter was in high school, she even lied to her principal, saying that we were beating her because we wouldn't allow her to date at 14. As I am a nurse and my husband was a substitute teacher, both of our certifications were at risk because of this lie. We've experienced the joys of CPS workers coming into our home on multiple occasions, separating all three children for interviews. Thank God our younger two always responded consistently, telling the social workers that we had never harmed them. Additionally, our oldest was subject not only to tantrums and meltdowns, but explosive and sometimes dangerous behaviors as well. She threw our younger daughter out of a second floor window when my oldest was 4 and my younger daughter 2. Thank God for the bush below that braced her fall and prevented her from harm. She later shoved my son down a flight of steps. These are only two of the attacks that she perpetrated upon her siblings. There were many others. She also somehow found lighters no matter where she went and started fires in our home. To be honest, we lived in genuine terror. The final straw was the day that she had reported us to the principal for beating her. My husband, after that, took her to her daily therapy appointment, and she informed the therapist that she planned to take a knife and stab us in our sleep. Do you know the guilt that a parent can feel when they are forced to do the unthinkable? To temporarily place a child in foster care in order to protect the safety of your younger children? Can you imagine the guilt that you would feel as you are forced to choose between your children? As we drove her to the hospital for treatment, knowing that we wouldn't be bringing her home was more painful than I can ever describe. Sadly, the 6 months she spent in foster care was the calmest our home had ever been. My two younger children finally had the chance to just be normal kids for once in their lives. No appointments, no fear of abuse, just time to relax and be kids. The 18 years in our home with our daughter were literally some of the most nerve-wracking years of my life, of all of our lives. She made the choice to run away shortly after her birthday, and while it sounds horrible, it almost came as a relief. Now, let me end this personal story with one of triumph. While it took time and life experience to change my daughter, she is now the mother of 3 children of her own. While I still worry because of her lower intellectual ability, she has matured greatly. She has realized just how difficult that she was to raise. Her "I hate yous" have turned into "I love yous," and "I'm so sorry for what I did when I was a kid." I'm sure hearing this might make you think that I regret my daughter, but the answer is no, never. As difficult as those years were, I love her with all my heart and would never ever say she was a mistake or that having her was something I regret. She is my oldest baby, and I am proud of the person she has grown up to be. Now, let's relate my story to that of Katie Joy. As a mother of a special needs child of my own, I find many of the comments directed towards her both disgusting and distasteful. Let's start by her repeatedly saying that she was happy with V being an only child and she never wanted another one. I often see this as criticized. I often see it as her basically making her way of showing that she is different than the Fundy families that she covers. But the reality is, from birth, V had experienced multiple medical challenges. Her reluctance to have any additional children, in my opinion, was completely justified. There were many days that I often wondered if my own daughter would have thrived more in a single child home. She wouldn't have had younger siblings to compete with educationally, and I'm sure it was hard for her to never meet up to them academically. It must have made her feel like a failure because when it came to them, everything was so easy, but it was such a hard road for her. For some children, a single child household is honestly the best way to ensure that they get the attention that they require to thrive. I also see such disgusting comments as V doesn't need a feeding tube because he also eats food by mouth. I am a nurse. There are many people with feeding tubes that also eat some food orally. Often you see that because their body is unable to process the calories and nutrients appropriately to allow them to gain weight or grow. While some people have a feeding tube due to swallowing issues, many others have them just to help them obtain the amount of nourishment required to thrive. So V enjoys Cheetos or whatever snack he enjoys. So what? Now I'm not speaking of V's particular need for a feeding tube. I'm only explaining one reason why someone who is able to take food orally could also still require a feeding tube. Judging Katie Joy for this, or making the baseless accusation that she is keeping the feeding tube in because she is lazy, is cruel and unnecessary. Trust me, I have given many a tube feed. I would much prefer to run into the kitchen, slap a piece of meat between two pieces of bread, rather than spend the 20 or 30 minutes it takes to complete a tube feeding. Tube feeding isn't the mark of a lazy parent, but of one who has to work far harder than a parent without special needs children. Additionally, Katie Joy can't win. If she discusses her son, she's sad fishing or attention seeking. If she doesn't discuss him, she's being emotionally detached. Has she tweeted while in the hospital at her son's side? Sure, she has. Does that make her a shitty parent? Nope. I myself have surfed Facebook while waiting. Time in a hospital seems to drag on forever. A swipe or a tweet while your child is napping quietly or when there's downtime doesn't a poor parent make. Sometimes you just need a release, even if only to take a moment to check what the latest gossip is. Now, I won't go into any additional speculation about Katie Joy's parenting style at this point, other than to say that while my own differs from hers quite a lot, it doesn't make her an abusive or neglectful parent. Do we live in a day and age where if someone isn't a cookie cutter parent, that their child should be removed from their custody? For anyone to weaponize the child protection reporting system against Katie Joy and her husband is disgusting. Nothing she has ever said regarding V's behavior is inconsistent with a child with autism. Like I went through with my own daughter, Katie Joy has reported that her son does similar traits and behaviors. Parents of neurotypical children or other outsiders will never understand the pain and frustration that watching your child go through this brings. Often, sadly, parents feel a sense of guilt and anger at themselves as they try desperately to find something that can prevent them from it happening to begin with. Give them the wrong shirt to wear? Meltdown. Ask them to put their toothbrush in its holder? Meltdown. Bump into them when they aren't expecting it? Meltdown. It can occur at the least expected time, and each one is different from the last. Does V scream at times? Yes. Could he have even screamed that his father punched him? And I'm not saying that he did. But what I'm saying is, V could have. That doesn't mean that his father did. Hell, my own daughter was fond of announcing in the middle of a store while flailing on the floor like a fish that we were killing her. It didn't mean that we were in fact killing her. That's just part and parcel of a meltdown. It's just a daily occurrence in the lives of a parent with a special needs child. For someone on the outside to contact CPS on Katie Joy and her husband is frankly reprehensible and unforgivable. No one knows what parenting a child with special needs is like, except for those that are going through it themselves. And in all honesty, not even another parent with a child with special needs can say what another one is going through. Why? Because each child is completely different and their reactions and problems are also completely different. While I've described my own experiences, they could be vastly different from someone else's child with similar diagnoses. How one child might react could vary completely from the next child. Could Katie Joy spend more time with her son? That isn't for you or I to decide, and frankly, none of us know how much time she really spends with him. Why? Because it's behind closed doors, as it should be. But even if she spent no time with her son at all, that would not prove abuse or neglect to him. Why? His father is a full-time caregiver, and they have nurses in their home frequently. As a nurse, I am well aware that all medical professionals are mandated reporters in every state in the United States. If there were any concerns, they would be under a legal obligation to report those to the appropriate authorities. No matter what your thoughts are on Katie Joy's particular parenting style, no evidence has been shown to indicate abuse or neglect. In all reality, it is difficult to gauge exactly how much time she spends with her son or what her level of involvement is. Why? Because she's forced to walk a tightrope in terms of how much information she shares. Share too much? She's sad fishing. Share too little? She's a selfish and inattentive mother. The reality is, it's a battle she's never going to win, no matter how hard she tries. Does she talk about him from time to time on her channel? As a parent of a special needs child, there simply are times that the frustration finally bubbles to the top, whether it be a medical crisis you're dealing with or an emotional situation that might crop up. Tweeting that she needs to shut the fuck up, take it off YouTube, and find a support group is highly disingenuous. The admissions that not one, not two, but three child abuse complaints were recently filed is disgusting. Report 1, screened out. Reporter kicks and screams until a supervisor looks into the allegations. Screened out a second time? Well, let's take it to the sheriff. Luckily, rather than the third time's a charm, it was screened out again. Okay, fine. You all hate Katie Joy with a passion. We get it. But has anyone stopped to think about the harm that might have happened to this child? Considering one of the allegations was sexual abuse, V could have been subjected to an invasive exam. I can't even bear to name what that would have been, but put your thinking cap on and you could probably figure it out. Or how about this? What if he had even been temporarily removed pending a full investigation? Do any of you have any idea how traumatic it would have been to a young child with not only special medical needs, but autism as well? The disruption would have been horrific to him, possibly causing him long-term or permanent emotional damage. Do you all despise Katie Joy so much that you could excuse away or justify the false reporting of abuse? If you can, Perhaps you should do some self-reflection, as you are clearly morally bankrupt. Am I a fan of Katie Joy? I sure am not. I haven't been one in a long time. But believe it or not, it is possible to disagree with her content without being hell-bent on not only destroying her channel, but her personal life as well. A simple gander around the Twitter streets, however, shows people thoroughly enjoying and justifying the actions of highly misguided individuals. I have never supported the personal attacks on Katie Joy's appearance or her family life, and I never will. If you've disagreed with a television reporter in your hometown, would you support such similar actions if they were taken against them? Would you celebrate them from happening? Worse yet, would you create a narrative that the allegations were questionable or the reporter had fabricated them, even if someone has admitted to being the one that filed them? Better yet, would you continue to openly state that the child is better off being removed than to remain in the custody of their parents? Or would you try to recruit others to continue filing additional reports? Being the parent of a special needs child is difficult enough. No matter what your thoughts or opinions are about Katie Joy, it is time to stop. Just stop. While Katie Joy is a grown woman, and I'm fairly sure she could take care of herself, on the other hand, V is an innocent child. The anti KJ community isn't just targeting a grown woman anymore. They are clearly gambling with the life of a young boy. For a community that states its purpose is to point out Katie Joy's problematic behavior, perhaps it's time for them to examine their own as well. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you again in my next video.